Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Renewable Energy and Sustainable Living presentation brought to you by MAREA, the Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Association. MAREA is a 501c3 nonprofit grassroots organization made up of volunteers dedicated to educating and engaging the public and advocating for renewable energy production, energy efficiency, and sustainable living. We encourage you to listen, ask questions, experiment with what you learn, and help others become more sustainable. I'm Joe Matisco, a MAREA board member and tonight's host. This is our third meeting for this year, and we will be back the last Tuesday of each month through October to continue our presentations on renewable energy and sustainable living. We post our presentations and registration links on our website, www.themarea.org, where you can also add yourself to our mailing list to receive our email reminders. Also, if you'd like us to consider any specific future topics and/or are aware of any speakers related to that topic, or if you'd be interested in becoming a MAREA board member yourself, please reach out to us through our website or via email at hello@themarea.org. And please join us on Tuesday, April 29th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to learn about how energy efficiency works hand in hand with wellness. So tonight, again, thank you for joining us. We are presenting Waste, Recycling, and Circularity, Practicing What We Teach. And during the presentation, please mute your microphones. You can enter questions into the chat box, and at the end of the presentation, we will ask your chat questions to the presenter. Tonight's presentation will be recorded. And now I am pleased to introduce tonight's speaker, Albert Motel, Manager of Waste and Recycling at Villanova University. His responsibilities include overseeing waste management and collections on campus, as well as advocating for improved sustainable materials management, examples of which include, but are not limited to, waste reduction and optimization of reuse and recycling programs. Al is a certified recycling professional through Penn State University and the Professional Recyclers of Pennsylvania, as well as a certified true TRUE advisor of zero waste through the U.S. Green Business Council. With over 20 years of experience working in logistics and transportation, he brings a wealth of frontline and management experience in the areas of optimizing efficiency, safety, personnel management and development, and the use of digital operations. His experience managing waste collections operations across Southeast Pennsylvania for companies like Waste Management and Republic Services provided him with an understanding of not just how waste operations work, but also an understanding where the gaps exist that act as barriers toward improving sustainable materials management. Al brings these experiences, along with his passion for nature, to Villanova, trying to ignite positive change. And during his short time at Villanova University, he has helped improve sustainability on campus and beyond by increasing the volume of campus waste diverted from landfills and incineration. And his accomplishments have included initiating new recycling programs, expanding existing recycling programs, creating a composting program, the addition of aerobic biodigesters for diverting pre-consumer food waste, optimizing surplus material reuse programs, deployment of a recycling research engine, and working with students, staff, faculty, alumni, neighbors, vendors, and other universities to improve sustainable materials management wherever he can assist. So welcome, Al. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate the very lengthy but thorough introduction. Thank you also to Professor Chuck Coe from Villanova for inviting me to speak with everyone tonight. It's an honor and privilege to be here, and I'm very grateful for all of the participants, both now and future viewers, for their time and attention listening to this presentation. So you've heard a little bit about me and my role at Villanova. What I'm aiming to do is to try to improve sustainable materials management here, both through our own collections operation, but also trying to change the hearts and minds of Villanovans and new students as they come through the university system here. I want to talk with each of you a little bit tonight about circularity, our own responsibilities in circularity, and some things that are happening at Villanova. But first, I would like you to all use your mind's eye a little bit. Use your imagination. Think about where you live, where you work, where you play, and imagine that world or imagine that place without access to modern waste management infrastructure and systems. What could that look like? How would we act? How may we live differently? Think about it as if we live in ancient times, but with modern materials, modern things. You can still throw things out, but there's no curbside collection, no city dumps. Instead, it all just goes in your backyard or wherever you can put it. So this is what it could look like without proper waste management. Obviously, this is a cartoon image, a drawing, but using your imagination, imagine this is your backyard or your neighbor's backyard or the place where you work, the school where your children go. What are some of the issues that you can see in this image or smell, perhaps? Obviously, there's odors. There could be pests, contamination of soil, groundwater.
I'm waiting for it.
Unsightly. It's also unhealthy. Maybe there's not enough space. You don't have anywhere to put it. Could be fines and penalties. Rethink this scenario a little bit, and how would you live differently? Maybe reduce waste a little bit, or try to repair some of these things to get them back in service, recover some of the value through selling them or recycling them. But we don't have that in this imagination. If you would think about it, could we all say and could we all agree that waste management is important? I'd like to think so, and that's the perspective that I'm talking to you from tonight. So first, it's important for us to really think about waste and how we define it. There's some studies out there that say there are about 300,000 different items in the average US household. Trying to narrow that down into a few different categories, I'd like to look at 12 different categories, which I've listed here. First, from top left, we have putrescibles or food, plant debris, textiles, polymers, metals, glass, paper, wood, soils, ceramics, chemicals. And some of you may be saying all of these things are chemicals, right? So why do we want to look at chemicals as a separate material? Well, this here is specifically looking at household chemicals or chemicals we use every day, but we may not finish using. And then lastly, electronics. When we get goods, the point of use, the consumer, we use them. And then when we no longer want them, we discard them at end of life. Throw them in a waste bin. Somebody comes and picks it up, takes it away. And it generally goes to one of 2 or 3 locations here in the United States. About half of all of the waste, municipal waste generated in the United States, according to the EPA in 2018, went to landfill. 11% went to waste to energy incineration. Another 32 to 34% went to recycling centers or scrap yards or was recycled in some other way. And then lastly, about 4% was composted. And this would be the food waste or putrescibles that we talked about in the previous slide. So each of these, some value, some energy is recovered from these materials. Not a lot in some cases. This is a renewable energy group. I don't know if there are any people on this call or listening to this that work in waste to energy. And there are some systems that work and some systems that work better than others. But still, you're not recovering all of the value or all of the energy when we burn materials to make energy or when we digest food to make biofuels. So looking upstream, what can we do differently to recover a little bit more value? Some of the cost that went into mining materials, manufacturing things, transporting them to consumers, do we get all of that value back when we use something perhaps just once and throw it out? And in most cases, we don't. So how can we recover some of that, more of that value? And what we like to do is we look towards the circular economy, circular principles. Many of you have heard the R's, and we'll get into that in another slide, but looking at things like reuse, repair, repurposing things, or even reselling them to recover some of that value. And then materials stay in the value chain. They continue to be used. The life cycle extends beyond that initial life. Back to the point of use. Another thing we can do looking upstream is just to rethink the goods that we purchase. Rethink whether we need them or not. If it's a necessity or if it's just a want. Is there a better option? Can we refuse something and choose something else? Good example of that would be to reuse a single-use beverage container and instead opt for a reusable one instead. And then redesign. So redesigning products to be either more recyclable at the end of life or designing systems to maximize waste diverted from landfill or waste to energy. So these are some of the areas that I focus on. My role at Villanova is deeply rooted in trying to figure out the problems and solutions to some of the processes or systems on this diagram. So rethinking, looking upstream, rethinking waste, a challenge that I have for all of you, and a challenge that I put on myself, is to rethink of what I'm consuming and rethink at end of life. Is there a better option for that material in order to recirculate that value or to recover some of that value, not just for my own personal wallet and my own personal finances, but also in my role at Villanova? How can we look differently at our waste materials to perhaps recover some of that additional value or recirculate it either within our community or outside of our campus boundaries? Reducing waste also reduces cost. Waste is an indicator of inefficiency. The more we waste or the more we generate, the less efficient we are. Diverting materials from landfill incineration, while it does recover some value, that value is only recovered once and that material is gone. In the case of a modern landfills have come a long way. Now we have the ability to harvest and capture landfill natural gas from landfill operations, using that to create biofuels and using it for other purposes. But the landfill really truly doesn't start capturing that gas until the landfill cell is closed. And even when we do recover energy from waste, it's just a one-time deal. Recirculating those materials in a circular economy allows that material to continue in the value chain. So looking left to right, the linear economy is just that. It's a straight line going from the point of extraction of resources to the point of making something, consuming those materials, and then discarding them at end of life. Moving to the circular economy keeps materials in the value chain in a loop, and it moves through different stages of production, extraction, production, and consumption, all the way through to the point of disposal. I like this graph, or this graphic, I should say, because it simplifies it, but there's also a piece of this that I think everyone should pay attention to. I'd like you to remember it for future slides, but if you follow this clockwise from the top where it says raw materials, imagine this is a material in the value chain. Through sustainable design and production, a material is created, a product is created. It's then distributed, consumed, but at the point of consumption, it's either reused or repaired, and it continues until it reaches end of life. It can no longer be repaired, renewed, or reused again. And as we get closer to the end of this loop, you can see there's a line that deviates to the left, that is the point where the circle is broken. We return to the linear economy. And I want you to remember that because if you notice, that happens in the recycling section. So recycling can both be a circular process and a linear process. And that's important to note for future slides. So how do we live or work within a circular economy? And many of you have heard about the 3 R's of circularity, the most popular 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Well, I've listed about 21 other R's here, and I'm not going to read through them for sake of time. Those of you who review these slides later can use it as a reference point. I will say it's not a comprehensive or exhaustive list either. There are many other R's that can be added to this. Some others like regulate or retrain, revolutionize. But I want you to pay attention to the number 1 R that I have listed up there. And it's one you don't see often or think about often, and that's responsibility. We each have a responsibility in this. Oftentimes we don't feel we do because we're just one person, we're one individual. But when you add that up across the collective population, those little differences, those little changes we make add up to big differences. So going back to the main 3 R's and adding a few more, the most popular 3 R's of reduce, reuse, recycle, I've also added refuse and recover to this. So refuse is at the top and recover is towards the bottom. This diagram represents what we call the waste pyramid, and it's a hierarchy for best practices in dealing with waste. And once again, this isn't comprehensive. There are many other R's that can fit into this, but I want to keep it as simple as possible for sake of time and the attention of the audience. But the first two, the only true green, as in go, green colored options on this diagram are refuse and reduce. Those will reduce or eliminate waste. Therefore, they are the best practices. So those are proactive decisions we would all make prior to the point of consumption. When we're making that decision, we're in the decision-making process about what we're going to use. Next up would be reuse. And that is exactly that, keeping materials or keeping items, products in circulation to use over and over again so we can maximize that value recirculation and also energy recirculation. The energy that was used to make these materials is lost when they're discarded, unless they're kept in cycle. Then energy is reduced from having to create something from scratch or from virgin materials. Towards the bottom in red, nonetheless, is recycle. And as you remember from the previous diagram with the circle, recycle is at the border of the linear economy. So it should be a last resort option for disposal whenever possible. But it does help conserve resources. Rather than having to mine or extract materials, we can turn an aluminum can back into another aluminum can, or in some cases now a plastic bottle back into a part of the plastic bottle, or paper into paper, so on and so forth. Recycling also supports stronger local economies and creates jobs. The recycling centers usually need to be located geographically close to the areas they serve. So more jobs are created and stronger local economies can be created as well. But recycling requires more energy, fuel, and labor and water consumption than reusing a material as is. So reuse will always, in most cases, I should say most cases, not always, reuse will be better than recycling. Despite the negatives of recycling, it's still necessary and it is part of a circular economy because nothing lasts forever. And at some point, materials will reach end of life. So we will want to recover as much as we can from those materials to create new items and new products. Here's the boundary I had mentioned previously that separates the linear economy from the circular economy. Recover, which sits below or even slightly above the circular economy, linear economy boundary, is recovering energy from materials. So this would be, in some cases, some of your waste to energy processes. Because
I'm gonna take the sweater off, aren't I, bud?
Even though we are recovering energy from the materials or from the waste, it's a one-time deal. And then lastly, it's burning, burying, or discharge to water for waste. This is something that should be avoided. And in recent editions of this, in some cases, waste to energy is listed at the bottom, or I should say waste to energy incineration is listed in the disposed category, according to the Zero Waste International Alliance, their latest version of the waste hierarchy pyramid. So recycling, while it sits at the bottom of the circular economy in the waste hierarchy, it still is important, and it is still a necessity in many cases. But oftentimes it is underappreciated. It tends to be the materials management process that most people would gravitate towards saying is the thing they participate in. When it comes to sustainable materials management, many people do recycle, and the types of materials being consumed in some cases do feed a recycling system quite well, although our overconsumption and lack of access to recycling systems can somewhat reduce the impacts of recycling. But I really like this graphic because at the bottom, it shows the percentage of energy saved of recycling these materials, these common materials, instead of producing them from virgin materials. So some significant energy savings. I've been told we're in an emergency energy crisis right now, and I'd like to think that if more people did a better job recycling or reducing waste, we can solve that. This graphic here really kind of touches on how a circular economy also touches on many of the ESG factors. It's not just good for the planet, but it's also good for our pockets and for people. Oftentimes, poor management of waste tends to impact marginalized communities or undeserving populations more than people who are better off or financially in a better position. It also creates jobs and can get some money back into people's pockets if they waste less. So the economic and social pieces are often overlooked, but still quite significant. So problem we see today is that circularity is important. We check that box. We know that waste management is important. Otherwise, we'd end up with mounds of waste in our backyards. So check that box. Recycling is part of a circular economy, but it's also a waste management process. So it checks that box. So why is recycling not working? This article from The Hill, from early January 2023, talks about how in the United States, more than half of our household recyclables, the things that actually can be recycled, more than 50% are ending up trashed. They're going in a trash bin. Are we even trying to recycle? In some cases, 25 to 30% of the material going in a recycling bin is also trash and should not be there. So are we really trying to recycle? So part of the issue with contamination is wish cycling, people putting things in a bin in hopes that it'll get recycled, but in many cases there isn't a market for recycling that material where they live, or it looks like something that could be recycled, or they're just not sure and hope it gets recycled. That is a big problem, and it undermines the health of recycling programs. Every dollar spent, every bit of energy consumed to separate and sort materials from a mixture of recyclables that are collected lowers the value of those materials being harvested and collected so then when they're resold to market, they can't compete with virgin materials. So that kind of creates this positive reinforcing loop of negative outcomes where things just keep kind of spiraling in the wrong direction. There's also a lot of confusion around recycling. This consumer brand survey from 2019 talks about how only 4% of the people interviewed did not think recycling was confusing, and a majority, did. Majority were confused. 26% thought it was more challenging than building IKEA furniture. Don't mean to pick on IKEA. They make great stuff, and they're a very sustainably conscious company, but their furniture can be tough to put together. So that's quite a statement, or quite a finding from that survey. Also, according to the EPA, there's 9,800 different recycling systems across the United States, different curbside programs, and many of them have their own unique set of rules. At Villanova, it's no different. We have a population of students, staff, and faculty coming from all over the world, and each place they come from oftentimes may recycle differently than we do on campus at Villanova. Heck, just a few feet away from Villanova, when you leave the campus boundary and move into one of the neighboring municipalities, they even recycle differently. So that confusion causes some of that issue of materials being tossed in the trash instead of recycled, and also contaminants in the recycling bins. Now, this is a video link. I'm not going to play a video for you tonight, but I will talk a little bit about the overall theme of this video, and I'd suggest you watch. It's only about 3.5 minutes long, but it talks about another issue that creates confusion with recycling in regards to the many different programs that we have across the United States. So waste collections are privatized in the United States in most cases. In many instances, the municipal government or a municipal authority may conduct the collections, or in the case of Villanova, we do manage our own collections as well. But I'd say in the most cases, private waste companies are responsible for collections of trash and recycling. And there are many different companies across the country. There are many different markets across the country for recyclable materials. With that said, each area is often left with the task of creating their own materials, their own informational materials, their own recycling signage, their own outreach campaigns. And the analogy in this video is using a traffic sign analogy. If every municipality, every school, every organization across the country had to create their own traffic signs, what would that look like? And what would be the outcome? And the outcome in most cases would be an increase of accidents. And that's what we have with recycling because of the confusion. Another challenge for recycling, and I'm picking on the plastics right now, but the same can be said for glass or other materials, is the fact that we make packaging to be a billboard. We create all kinds of pretty colors of plastics or glass materials, really as a way of selling more, a billboard for that product, and make it stand out against the competition just by the way it looks. And that creates problems. This bottle here, or this container of what would be laundry detergent, is made of high density polyethylene, or HDPE. It's valuable in the recycling market. There is a demand for post-consumer HDPE. It's used to make a lot of things. In fact, a lot of our waste bins on campus are made from post-consumer high-density polyethylene. The problem is when it's orange or pink or green, or really just any color other than natural or white. This is the same plastic used for a milk jug. So think about that and where the market would be for this type of material. It takes a lot to, well, first of all, it reduces the versatility of the post-consumer materials. There aren't many options when you've got a mixed bag. You mix them all together. If any of you have ever had Play-Doh as a kid and you start mixing the colors together, it gets kind of ugly towards the end, where you have like this, it's not quite a rainbow. It's just a mess of colors, almost like this glob of dark Play-Doh. Keep going, eventually you'll get to black or close to black. And that's really the only end use for some of these plastics is something that it limits them from being used in more applications. It's difficult to sort out from other materials, although there are some technologies and some innovations and advancements happening with AI and optical sorting right now. It's just the capital to invest in those things can be a bit much for everybody. The other issue is the contamination of post-consumer batches of recycled materials. When you have the different colors, it just doesn't create a good end product. So it creates lower demand for that material, and lower demand means lower values, which then, if you think about it, going back to the economic side of it, if there's no demand for it, there's no value, then people aren't going to really want it recycled. And that's what happens with some of these materials. If there's not a market for it, we don't recycle it. It just goes to the landfill or it goes to be burned. The other issue with some of these colors is the dyes used are oftentimes the harmful chemical additives that can cause health issues when leached into consumables or the environment. But it's not all doom and gloom. Recycling can be done well. And an industry that I like to point to talk about how recycling works well is the lead acid battery industry. It's been around for a very, very long time. Lead acid batteries have been in use since the late 19th century. And for a long time, they were mismanaged. There were some articles that you can read about issues in economically struggling neighborhoods around Baltimore and other areas of the country where people were burning the chassis from spent lead acid batteries to heat their homes in cold winters because it was free or cheap, affordable fuel source. That wood was contaminated with lead, and burning lead isn't a good idea in your home. It created a lot of attention towards this issue, and that attention resulted in what I would say are solutions that are ahead of many other products. So thinking of some of the materials we use, some of those 300,000 different items that I talked about earlier, many of those are relatively new inventions in the grand scale of human existence. So batteries have been around just a little bit longer than a lot of the plastics that we're using or some of the composites and other materials. So the solutions are ahead of their time as well. And I would suggest pointing to this example if you wanted a good example of recycling and how it works. So how did they do it? They redesigned batteries to be better recycled, easier to be recycled. Nearly all the components, including the lead and plastics, are recoverable and reusable. The regulations had come about both at the national level through the RCRA, or Resource Conservation Recovery Act, banning mismanagement of hazardous materials. And then also many states have since added to that some additional rules and regulations mandating proper recycling and improper banning improper disposal for batteries. Extended producer responsibility has helped improve recovery because manufacturers are required to participate in take-back programs, and they also help fund collections and transportation for the recycling of used batteries. And we're starting to see a lot more buzz around EPR in other industries. One I see a lot now is in the textile industry, to get manufacturers to be a little bit more responsible for the things that they're selling us. Revalue. So consumers are able to get value back from these batteries. They're incentivized to recycle them because of deposits that are charged on them when they're purchased. So without that used battery, you have to pay, in a lot of cases, it may be $20 to $50, excuse me, but deposit that's then refunded when you bring that battery back at end of life when you no longer want it. So it improves the recovery rate by incentivizing recycling. Retraining. Decades and years of awareness campaigns have taken place Excuse me. And the industry has collaborated to carry that out, to get people to understand their role and responsibility and proper disposal behavior. And then lastly, recycling. Advanced recycling technologies have been around to improve smelting or refining procedures. And digging a little bit deeper into the deposit and return system or deposit and redemption scheme success, I'd like to point to Germany. This article here, this recent article, talks about how they achieved a 98% recycling rate or return rate for single-use plastic bottles. So we have some challenges. Recycling is confusing, but it's important. And it can work. We know it can work. So what are we doing at Villanova? One thing we're doing is rolling out a centralized waste station. So we've been piloting this across a few locations where instead of having small trash bins in every single office, classroom, meeting space, whatever it may be, that really doesn't provide access to other waste streams to divert waste from landfill. Excuse me. We've been moving towards this centralized waste stations in common spaces that have access to all of the waste diversion opportunities. So it forces people in some ways to get up and move and bring their material to a station and have the opportunity to divert it from landfill. So we're providing better access to recycling by doing this. We're also reducing costs and labor, reducing costs because we have less bags, less waste liners. If we have, thinking about it, we have hundreds of or 100 buildings or so on campus. Many of them have many waste bins. So we're talking thousands of waste bins that sometimes are emptied a few times a day. So all of those waste liners add up and quite frankly can be end up being a large portion of our single-use plastic generation on campus, single-use plastic waste generation on campus because of the sheer volume. And also all of the frontline custodial employees that have to empty them on a regular basis. In addition to those centralized waste stations, we've also updated our signage, going back to that traffic sign analogy, we still had to do it, but we are trying to follow a standard, not just a standard across our campus, but a standard that's being adopted in other areas of color coding by waste stream and following a specific color code format. I don't know if this will ever become standardized across the country in my lifetime, but I will tell you that it would help to have a color coding system across the country just to help reduce confusion. So these signs are color coded, clearly labeled. They also have pictograms or graphics of many of the different common items that would be disposed of in that bin. And these are just a few examples. We have different variations for different settings based upon information we find by either observing the waste as it's being picked up in the buildings or through our waste audits, which we'll talk about in a little bit. There's, aside from that information, it also has a QR code on the bottom, which will take you to our website. And on that website, we have a search engine. We call it our Put Waste in Its Place search engine. So the Villanova community members who were to access this site, or really anybody, but the information is really only valid on campus at Villanova. You can type in many different materials, different things that you can think of that you may be discarding or looking to discard, and it will give you instructions on how to do so at Villanova, following the best choice down to the least favorable choice if available. It'll also give you information that will tell you where our drop-off locations are for some of our specialty wastes, some of the specialty recyclable materials. And those directions or those locations come with directions that you can follow turn by turn from a smart device or from a laptop. while walking on campus. So we're trying to improve access, but also help people find these different locations and drop-offs. We're doing many other things at Villanova too, and I won't go through. This is just a list of some things that I can think of that are happening to support the main three, the most popular three of reduce, reuse, and recycle. Things from overarching university-wide sustainability initiatives to individual pop-up events that support circularity and sustainable materials management. We have some partnerships with third-party vendors in and around the Philadelphia area that are also aligned with pursuing or achieving circularity. And we're constantly looking for options to improve our waste diversion rates by partnering with more. A lot of nonprofits benefit from surplus materials on campus, food donations to food banks, so on and so forth. So a lot of good stuff happening, and it's not just within my team and my department. These are some pictures of some of the things, a picture of one of our digesters, some surplus office chairs that were donated to a furniture bank, and an example of our battery drop-off bin, where we accept batteries, e-waste, and also printer cartridges for recycling. Zero waste events happen a lot. We've had, in the past year, I'd say more than a dozen successful zero waste events that have exceeded 90% diversion from landfill and incineration. Book recycling, a lot of books in a university. Our classes or our courses have been moving more and more towards electronic textbooks. But we have, oftentimes we have faculty that after a wonderful long career will retire, and sometimes they have those textbooks from when they first started, studying in their field. And there's a lot of books generated, book waste generated. So we recover them. We started recovering them and take them to a local paper mill to be made into new paperboard. The middle picture on the bottom is another example of one of our centralized waste stations, and a better picture, a better image of the liquid waste. And that is something we're pretty proud of. Information we learned from a waste audit show that beverage liquids and ice make up of a significant amount of our campus waste that's generated, the consumer waste. People, students, faculty, and staff all love their iced coffees. And if you think about an iced beverage, you consume the beverage, but that ice oftentimes remains in the cup, and then that cup goes in the recycling bin. It melts, and it could damage the paper that's also in that bin, or it just adds extra weight that we're hauling, all the extra emissions and cost for nothing. So we've been collecting it into these liquid pour stations and then discharging it down the drain. I'm actually working with some grad students now to conduct some research on that to see if we could better quantify the benefits. And then lastly, a picture of a bunch of boxes getting ready to go out to nonprofits that materials we've collected from students as they move out. It's a big event every year. Another piece of the puzzle is data. I'm a data stickler, and really believe that without data, it's really hard to do anything. It's hard to persuade leadership that we need to invest in making decisions aligned with circularity. It's very difficult to change the behavior and hearts and minds of the community without progress. Thinking about a sporting event, if they didn't have a scoreboard, many people wouldn't go. It might not be as fun. It might not be the same without a scoreboard. It just helps boost that competitive spirit to get people participating. We get data a couple different ways. One of them is by conducting waste audits, like I had said. These images were from a waste audit we did, I think back in spring of 23. With the help of one of the Villanova classes. So it was part of a lab. We brought students over, utilizing campus as a living lab to help dissect waste and help us quantify things to figure out where our opportunities are, and also gauge the success of our existing programming. The other way is through being a hauler. We haul our own wastes. We get to weigh that material when we take it to the disposal facilities. So a little snapshot of how we've been doing in the past few years. Really only showing data from the past 5 because that's how long I've been with Villanova, just a little bit longer than that. And I know the methodology behind the data collection and trusted its accuracy. So our total waste diversion is increasing and improving year over year. And, it's improved significantly, but we still have a long way to go. For the first time in 14 years, the amount of trash that we generate on campus has declined year over year. We're starting to see that move down. It'll be interesting to see what happens as the university continues to grow. So we also measure these metrics in other ways. These are just some high level metrics, but we also look at per capita generation. Single stream recycling has increased nearly 100% in the past 5 years. So that's the volume of single stream recycling on campus. It's increasing significantly, and we attribute that to some changes we made in our single stream program to accept more materials. We decided to move towards sending our material to a different recycling facility that has innovated with some state-of-the-art sorting technology to be able to accept flexible plastics. So we can accept flexible plastics along with all rigid polymers in our recycling program. And those materials, the flexible plastics, go on to become R-Flex, which is a building material, replacing some materials that are made from wood. So helping to prevent resource depletion and reducing the demand on natural resources. Total waste recycled significantly, it's increased, but significantly increased year over year. And that's a bit of an anomaly. We did have 2 structures demolitioned during the past year to make way for new improvements. And we were fortunate enough to be able to recycle most of that material. So that is counted in this metric. We also do track our metrics without construction and demolition waste. And that's what some of the earlier metrics were how they were determined. Organics waste, we're moving up, we're moving in the right direction, but it's slow. We really lack infrastructure in the region to expand composting. We're looking at some options to sort front of house food waste, so the consumer facing materials, because there's no infrastructure in this region to be able to remove trash and unwanted materials from a compost stream. And then lastly, looking at reuse, and in many cases it's donations or internal reuse, but that number has been climbing very well over the past few years and will continue to climb as we promote more reuse. So I like this quote a lot. I think it does a good job summarizing, how I feel, but also I think it touches well on Villanova and its Augustinian core values. And that's, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. Instead, we borrowed from our children. So that, to me, is why I do a lot of this. I have children of my own. As part of the Villanova community, and seeing the children as they are at times coming to school for the first time or coming to college for the first time, I think about their parents and how they feel about those students or their children, and what can I do to help leave a better legacy, leave this place a little bit better than I found it. And that lies true with Villanova as well, in that the Augustinian values of caring for the common good, or even Pope Francis and his Laudato Si Laudato Si declaration of caring for our common home. There's a lot of synergy between all of these concepts of just being better stewards of our planet and each other, and caring for the common good. And a lot of times that in Villanova, there's a lot of pride. People want to get involved. People want to do things. They want to give back and want to be those better stewards. So we have a lot of ways people can do that. We have some paid student positions. So we obviously have paid full-time staff positions tied to sustainability, but we also have student positions. We work with student volunteers, staff and faculty volunteers who are taking part in service work to do a lot of different things, whether it be hosting zero waste events, doing outreach, helping to sort waste during student move-ins, so we're trying to recover cardboard boxes or whatever it may be. Villanovans love to get involved, roll up their sleeves, and help. And I'm blessed to be a part of a community that has such great people. When we've collected furniture and donated it, to people in need, it's been a wonderful thing to be a part of. We also won a zero waste competition, Campus Race to Zero Waste 2024. We won the green events category for events less than 100 attendees, diverting 98.3% of all waste from landfill incineration. And that was our first win in the Campus Race to Zero Waste. It's been something we haven't competed in much, but hoping to become more frequent competitors. We're enrolled in it again this year, and it's just nice to be able to bring a victory back to Villanova in a time when we're used to seeing our team playing basketball, hopefully going for another championship. We're trying to keep that winning spirit alive. So, taking it to each of you, what can we do? What can you do in your own lives to support circularity? Think about what you purchase, what you consume. Is there a better option, or do you really need it? Is there a reusable option? Maybe something secondhand or used? Can it be used again after you don't want it again? Or can it be reused, sold, or donated? And then, is it repairable? In some cases, you may not have the wherewithal to do the repairs, but I will tell you, I'm the resident Mr. Fix-It in my household. There's a YouTube video for just about everything, and there are a lot of organizations and advocates out there to help protect the right to repair. And the information can be there, and if I can do it, so can you. But if you don't have the time or the energy or want to do it, there are people out there that can repair things. Is the item recyclable? Or is it just going to end up in the trash? Try to lean towards items that can be recycled, and knowing whether or not they could be recycled in your area is important. Can it be effectively recycled or composted at end of life? And is it made from recycled content or post-consumer material, or even sustainably sourced? Buying materials that are made from post-consumer materials helps promote recycling. You're creating a market for those materials after they've been recovered from a recycling facility or a recycler. If there's a market for post-consumer materials, it's going to drive the demand, and it's going to help boost recycling systems and programs. You also want to understand your local recycling and composting options. Remember, I mentioned that there are 9,800 different systems across the US, according to the EPA. Well, try your best to know what to do. We're providing tools to Villanovans or any of you, if you come to visit us, to help understand what goes in each bin. But that information isn't always easy to find. So check with your local municipality where you live. Check with your whatever organization you're visiting or working in, and try to understand what their rules are, because it does matter what we put in the bins and where we put our waste. Be a conscious consumer and put waste in its place, both by putting it where it goes, but also putting it in its place by telling it you don't want it in your life. You want to reduce it. You want a fatter wallet and a lighter waste bin. And then advocate for circularity and be the change you want to see in the world. What would you do differently if you had nowhere to get rid of your waste? And going back to that image of the pile of waste in the backyard, if that was your house or your backyard or your neighborhood, what would you do differently? And ask yourself that every time you purchase something. So that's it for my presentation today. I think I may have stuck to the time, or I might have gone over by a couple minutes, but I'm
No,
here for
great,
questions.
great job, Al.
Thank you.
Excellent information. And based on the comments that I've seen, uh, really appreciated. Number of questions in the chat. We'll start with those. A comment, I wish we could recycle aluminum pie tins, which I think you
You can,
can, correct?
you can, provided they are not overly contaminated with food residue. A general rule of thumb is about a tablespoon of residuals in a container is about the limit you would want to have for contamination. And I was bring up the peanut butter jar. You don't want to waste 10 gallons of water to rinse the peanut butter out of the jar, but if you can scrape most of it out so there's only a little bit of coating on it, that can be recycled. It's when, 300% of the weight of that container is peanut butter, then that it really becomes a problem. A small amount of residual is fine, but that pie pan or pie tin should be recyclable. Joyce, I would say if you can follow up with your municipality or your local waste authority, they can clarify that.
Hey, while we're talking about contamination, can you comment on pizza boxes?
Yes, pizza boxes. That's another good one. They are recyclable. They are in demand as long as they don't have food in them, as long as they don't have non-conforming materials. So you would think that wax piece of paper that sits at the bottom of the pie to protect the pie and cheese from sticking to the cardboard box. I'm getting very descriptive because, as you can tell, I'm an avid pizza connoisseur. I eat lots of pizza, but the wax piece of paper would need to go into the trash. The pizza, any of the remaining pizza, compost it, feed it to animals. If you don't want it, give it to your neighbor, but remove it from the box. If all that is left is a greasy cardboard box, that can go in the recycling bin. There's a significant demand for cardboard right now with the boom in e-commerce, especially post-pandemic. So put it in the bin, but check with your local municipality. In some cases, they don't know that the recycling centers are taking that as an acceptable material, and they have older literature or older marketing materials that say no pizza boxes. So put some onus on them to verify with their recycling center whether or not they want them, and then heed their advice when they do get back to you. In most cases, it should be recyclable.
Okay, another question. Are aluminum cans coated with plastic on the inside?
Yes, they are.
And so I go with the next question too. Steel cans coated as well, I imagine.
Yes and no. They are coated, but the coating may be different than that of aluminum cans.
I didn't know aluminum cans were coated.
There's a really good video you can search for on YouTube. It's short. I wish I knew the name or the title of it, but it's a science experiment where somebody dissolved the aluminum part of the can to leave the plastic liner intact while it still had the beverage in it. So it looked like a little clear balloon hanging underneath what was left of the aluminum shell of the can.
Wow. Interesting. Have any communities reached out to you for info on how they may use your ideas to improve their recycling efforts? And have you published your ideas?
I collaborate a lot with municipalities, county recycling coordinators, other colleges and universities. We're always talking, even though we, in some cases, with the colleges and universities are competing with each other. It doesn't seem that way. We all understand the stakes in this and the huge mountains we need to overcome to close the loop and right the ship. So I'm in constant conversation. We share ideas. A lot of these ideas aren't my own. They are borrowed or recycled from others. And I have not published anything as of yet. Just really haven't had the time to write. But this is a busy gig. I wear a lot of hats in my role each day, and I try to try to share my time and as much as I can with community members as well.
And there's a question, does the student move out donation drive include just on-campus students? Because they've seen an incredible amount of items sent to the curb near Temple University.
It does not. It is limited to just Villanova students though, because of capacity. We don't have a lot of space, and we collect a lot of material, so we can't. I'm not going to check a student ID by any means. If a Temple student came to me and wanted to drop off some items, but we try to just accept from Villanovans because of capacity issues. We don't have storage space, and we need to oftentimes build up our programming quickly to be able to move the amount of material we do, and then tear it down in time for commencement so that that operation can happen, and then we build it up again. So the logistics of it are quite a juggernaut. Not something I want to expand beyond our boundaries yet.
Sure. How much food waste goes into biodigesters, and what happens to the digested material?
Great question. Right now, we're processing about 1,000 pounds of pre-consumer food waste through the digesters a day. And it goes down the drain once it's treated. So the enzymes break down the food waste to just water and carbon dioxide. For the most part, there's very little biosolids that are remaining, and that goes down the drain. We understand that there are better options for food waste, but right now, with some of our space constraints, that was the best option we had available. We would love to be able to use the material as a byproduct, use the byproducts from the process somehow on campus or within the market, but the logistics and the space constraints that we face won't allow us to do that yet. But we're hoping that with future development, there could be some more innovative things we can do with our food waste.
And I assume you accept plastic lids as well.
As long as they're about the size of a credit card or larger, they can be accepted. That's a good kind of gauge for the recycling bin. If it's something is smaller than a credit card, don't put it in the bin because it won't survive the process of being sorted and separated with other like materials.
Recycling mattresses would be something to get started nationally.
Well, we don't have the capacity to actually do the recycling. Well, it would be more of a collection process on campus, and then we'd be working with a mattress recycler to do the dirty work of cutting them open and separating the materials to be recycled. We're trying to bring that to the Philadelphia region, working in conversations with other colleges and universities, other commercial enterprises that may generate a lot of mattress waste to facilitate the building of that infrastructure in the Philadelphia area by an organization that's already doing that in another region. So we're excited about it. It's not definite yet, but hopefully it'll happen. There's a need for it.
Excellent. Best recycling presentation I've ever seen. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And I would agree. And are you recycling HDPE and PETE materials, which I believe you said you are?
Yes.
And where do you donate furniture, and who is it available to?
We have quite a few partners, and sometimes just one-time needs that are filled. So it really depends on what type of furniture it is and the condition, how it can be used again. So a regional group that we love to support and work with is Pathways to Housing or Philadelphia Furniture Bank. They take anything that is in usable condition, good condition, that could fit in a residential setting because they're trying to provide transitional housing to people who are informally without a home. But we also work with schools. If you're thinking about Villanova as a university, we have a lot of different furniture. We have the typical commercial office space type of furniture, but we also have furniture that would be in cafeterias and a restaurant setting. We also have classroom furniture. So it's a lot of times just about finding the right end user at the right time and having a good internal communication to understand when these opportunities are coming up. If there's going to be furniture that's going to become surplus through a project, connecting the dots and treating it as a kind of a dynamic but a real-time exercise helps us do that. But
Yeah, my wife and I have used actually Restore through Habitat for Humanity. Depending on the condition of your furniture, they might take it. As you mentioned, also other thrift stores, or you could check with them as well.
yep, yeah, Habitat is a partner of ours. We work with them through the Office of Mission and Ministry and the Center for Common Good at Villanova. They've helped facilitate that relationship. It's an extensive list of partners. I mean, there's probably 25 different organizations now that we're working with, especially with the onboarding of the new Cabrini, the acquisition of the Cabrini campus and the onboarding of that as part of the Villanova community. There's a flood of surplus materials.
Just another comment, real hope for our future in a healthy environment. I'd agree. Which recycling facility accepts soft plastics?
This is not an endorsement by any means, but it is Total Recycle in Birdsboro, Pennsylvania. There are also there are industry groups that other industry groups that will take soft plastics. You may see the drop-offs in retail stores, grocery stores. Oftentimes those are run by Trex. They use that material to create their composite boards. But there's a database somewhere. I did not have the link available to put in this presentation, but if whoever asked that question wants to reach out, I can share a link with them. But there's a database of drop-off locations across the United States, a search engine, so to speak, that'll show you where to take soft plastics in your area if there's a program available.
How would you rank a plastic bottle versus a glass bottle versus an aluminum can? If you have a choice, which is better or best?
I would avoid all of them if I had a true choice. But honestly, based upon life cycle assessment studies, I would say the plastic bottle is the more sustainable of those in many circumstances. The glass bottle could be if it's reused, but the plastic bottle is lighter and it's less resource intensive. It took less energy to create, less water consumption. It generates less waste at the end of its life. So on the reverse logistics side of it, it's all of the same things: less weight, less energy, less fuel. The problem is the circularity piece. Plastics recycling is not where it should be or could be. And some of the plastics we use, we might not want to be circular materials because of the things that are in the plastics, the additives, the issues with microplastics and such. But that's a tough question. There's no real good answer other than try to reuse. That's what I do, honestly. To pick the lesser of the evils, it's tough for me.
So when cans are coated, can they or can they not be recycled?
They can be, like the aluminum can that we were talking about. That's recyclable. They just basically melt off the polymer. Generally, cans are, because metals have more value than plastic. Cans are designed to be better recycled or easily recycled. It really just depends on if you start getting into weird shapes and sizes of cans, then it gets a little difficult for mechanical sorting processes.
Another comment, I learned new things tonight. Great. Thanks for a great presentation. And then another question, how is recycling done in the dorm buildings or centralized waste stations used there as well?
Not yet. So that is the residential application is probably our that is our most difficult battlefront, partly because students have the shortest amount of time with us. They're in and out, oftentimes in just a few years, and they're coming from all over the place, as I'd mentioned earlier, all different parts of the United States or even the world, and they're doing things differently. So we have to break old habits, retrain. We're not quite there yet. We have some opportunities to get better at the infrastructure we provide in the residential areas, especially with some of our newer community members. But we hope to get there. We're working on some. We have an RFP. We're working to partner with consulting groups to do more analytical work, project-based work to test those waters to see how far we can push the centralized waste program. But until then, they have access to trash rooms or waste rooms where it does act like the centralized waste, but they don't have access to composting, and they don't have access to the liquid waste programming in that central waste system. We just have no way of sorting the trash out of the food waste. So our composting program is only available to special audiences in certain circumstances, certain buildings, certain departments, or certain groups.
Do you recycle hard styrofoam?
No, so we do not recycle styrofoam currently. I've looked at some options for doing it. It's relatively in theory, it's a relatively simple process, but the styrofoam, before it's condensed, takes up too much space, and the value in recycling it, it just doesn't position it as a priority for us right now. We have some greater opportunities, one of them being food waste, because it makes up so much more of our waste profile. And we use the information, the data we get from our waste audits to kind of help us determine what our priorities are. So styrofoam, I'd love to be able to recycle it. It can be done, but it takes up a lot of space, and the return is very little. It's there's no cost benefit in doing it. A lot of the programming we've rolled out over the past few years have really come about through cost savings of reducing waste and diverting waste. In recovering that value, we've been able to reinvest a lot of that value back into infrastructure and programming and outreach and so on and so forth. And the business case didn't quite add up yet for styrofoam.
How do you know that your electronic waste is not ending up in Africa? Recent reports in the news indicate that much U.S. electronic waste ends up in Africa.
A lot of things end up in Africa. Some of it good, some of it not so good. There's a very strong secondhand market in Africa, so it's not that we want to cut off all material being sent to them, but we want to make sure that when we do send material there, we're sending good quality material. To answer the question, though, we have a good relationship with our e-waste recycler. We know what they're doing with the material. It's a Philadelphia nonprofit, and we've been able to tour their facility. We feel confident that it's not being mismanaged. They're also certified e-waste recyclers and have to uphold that certification through rigorous record keeping and such. So we're confident that if anything is ending up in Africa, it's a few steps down the reverse supply chain that neither us nor our e-waste recycler have intentionally done.
Are we supposed to leave? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Are we supposed to leave the caps on plastic bottles when recycling them?
Yes, in most cases, water bottles, milk jugs, a lot of the plastic bottles, the lid is the same polymer as the bottle itself. In some cases, it's not. That would be like an example of like a half gallon of orange juice with the larger cap. That's usually a different color, a bold color to stand out, or if it's a water bottle, the small cap, you want to leave it on the bottle because it's the same polymer. And also because it's small, that cap won't get recycled otherwise. If you take it off the bottle and put it in the bin loose, it's too small to survive the collections and sorting process. It'll just get lost in the residuals. So leaving it on ensures that the bottle and plastic will get recycled. It just gets a little tricky with some of if it's a clear bottle and it has a colored lid, a lot of times those lids are bigger. Take that off. And if it's larger than a credit card, you can put it in the recycling bin. If not, you discard it in the trash. But there's been a lot of pressure on bottling companies to move to using the same polymer for the lid so that they can just be left on.
Okay. And that answers the next question too about why can't we leave a plastic cap on plastic bottles that go to recycling? Same polymer can be left on.
Yeah, and it goes to the design, talking about rethinking,
Mhm.
upstream, making sure we're purchasing, and that's the power we all have, is trying to purchase from companies that are doing the right thing, companies that are thinking about what happens to the material after they sold it to you. What kind of sense of ownership or responsibility are they taking in the production of that material? It's not easy to know what the right decisions are, or which manufacturers to purchase from. That could be a life journey in itself, but after a while of paying more attention to this, you get better at it.
Another question just popped up. Can wax cartons with plastic lids be recycled, such as a half-gallon milk with or without a lid?
Great question. So you're talking about aseptic cartons, the cardboard cartons that now have a pour spout on the side of them. I have to be careful because I do have colleagues that I respect that are part of the Carton Council. I don't really like those aseptic milk cartons, the juice cartons or milk cartons, because of that cap and the confusion that can create. That cap, it should come off. If it's being recycled as cardboard, obviously you're probably at your limit of contamination with non-compatible materials with the rest of the plastic, the spout. So adding that cap in there really just isn't good for it. If you leave it on, it's not the end of the world, but to better ensure that cardboard gets recycled into as high of a grade material as possible, you would leave the cap off.
Do we need to wait until the plastic bottle is dry to put the lid on for recycling, or can it still be wet? And do they need to be rinsed, like if it is a small drink like a Gatorade?
They can be, they don't need to be completely dry. You want to make sure they're as dry as you can. But if you're out and about in public or something and you don't have the time to dry it out, at least pour out the residuals. Try to get as much of the liquid out because that's just extra weight. The weight of that bottle itself and all of the bottles added up in whatever recycling bin is the end destination for those materials. Even the slightest little bit of liquid left in one bottle probably would outweigh all of the plastic of the bottles combined in that bin. So it doesn't take much to have an impact when we're leaving liquids in containers or food in containers instead of diverting them where we can. So it would be best to pour it out, but it doesn't need to be air dry. Excuse me. I'm not used to talking so much, and I have this tickle in my throat.
No problem. Any other questions from our audience? That looks like that's the last one from our chat.
Wonderful. Well, this has been a wonderful opportunity. I'm really grateful to share the story with some additional listeners. Take part in this presentation. I am available if anybody wants to stay in touch or has questions, follow-up questions beyond this. You can email. We have a generic kind of catch-all email address that is recycling@villanova.edu. So feel free to reach out. I'm happy to stay in touch.
Well, thanks so much, Joe. We really appreciate your time. Appreciate all the great information you shared.